Greetings, fellow Onefinity woodworker owners. We're having a look here at the controller display, and you can see that my IP address is already set up and so forth, and my workshop, rather the SSID for my wireless router is called Workshop, and you guys probably have done something similar with your workshop equipment. I had a little bit of trouble getting it set up to connect to the router, which is actually in my garage some 30-40 feet away. I would go to the network setting, and that's right here, and I would get something like not connected, scanning, etc., etc., etc. And at the time, I had no IP address in there, so it literally didn't appear that it was connected, and certainly couldn't go to another computer, put in the IP address in the browser, and pull up the same page that we're looking at here on a different machine. So that was the first order of business, is to get that straightened out. So what I figured out here, and the part I wanted to share, is that if you hit the refresh button, may have to do it 2 or 3 times, but what's happening inside the controller, the Raspberry Pi, I believe, is the type of board it's inside the controller. It's doing its thing. It's looking for the radio from the router, and it's when you refresh the browser, it gets the most recent status of that process. But if it hadn't found it yet, then all you're going to see is what you saw before, which was scanning right here. So let's refresh one more time, and we'll see if it found anything since then. And apparently now it's at the moment it hasn't found anything yet. So I'm going to give it just a couple more seconds here and try it again. But I did find that hitting the refresh button repeatedly would eventually pull up the available SSID names in this Wi-Fi text box here. So at the moment we're still looking for them, apparently. And another thing I did that may be helpful for some of you guys, I actually took my phone and turned on the personal hotspot, and it actually laying on the controller, it didn't find it either for a while. And I turned off the machine, turned the machine back on, and eventually it found the personal hotspot, and just a second or two later, right below the personal hotspot, it showed the actual Wi-Fi network that I'm connected to, which, as I mentioned earlier, is Workshop. So what we're going to do now, we're going to try this refresh one more time, and getting the same result. So what we're going to do now is with the switch on the controller.
And we'll power it back up now. Try starting probably tomorrow.
All right, so we came back up. Try starting probably tomorrow. All right, so we came back up, and looks like we have our same IP address we had before. Let's see if the scanning will locate that SSID that we are using. And in my experience, if it's not up there in about 10 seconds, you can go ahead and hit refresh again. Let's just refresh the browser again. Now it's not showing that we have an IP address. So we may not actually be connected, but it's not finding our Wi-Fi, which is a modest distance away. The computer behind me is connected to it, and we're getting like 1,000 meg down, or sorry, 100 meg down. 1,000, I wish. Let's try this one more time. Yeah, I have found that you just have to be persistent with it. Eventually it'll give up and show you what you need to see. Yep, still no IP address. Let's give it just a minute here to look. It may have just been a coincidence, but when I had my personal hotspot turned on, it seemed to also find the other Wi-Fi, the workshop Wi-Fi SSID name. So that may have actually been what caused it to work the one time it did work. So I may try that again here shortly. And I'm going to try the refresh one more time, and if that doesn't do it, we'll probably go back to the drawing board on it. And it looks like we're not going to have any luck. So next I'm going to power the controller back down, and we'll try this one more time. All right, I booted back up, and that time it brought up the IP address. Kind of strange, 169.254.121.204. That's not an IP address on my local network as far as I can tell, but we'll try and figure out what's going on. Those are typically 192 something, so and that explains it. We can see it's now connected to my personal hotspot off my phone, and that explains the odd IP address, or different IP address. Unfortunately, it's still not picking up the workshop SSID that I want to connect to, so we're going to try the refresh again and see if that helps. And my goodness, what is that? That's rather strange. Doesn't look familiar to me. So we're going to refresh that again. And that's still the same thing. And that tells me that there we go. Okay, now that time it pulled up workshop. Anyway, the workshop there is the one we want. So click there, and it gives me the option to disconnect and reboot. And just for the demonstration purposes, that's what I'm going to do. So it will disconnect from that, and we'll have quite a bit of
time here. So let's see what we have here.
All right, not connected. That's what we expected. Not going to home the machine just this minute. Go back to network, and we're doing our scan again. And I would like to think at some point it would pick up the workshop SSID, but I have yet to see it do it without the personal hotspot being turned on the phone. Like it's just not going to find any unless it finds one real close, and then if it finds one real close, it may also find the one that's not as close. So if maybe that'll help some of you guys. I don't know, it took a little while to get that sorted out. And once again, we're seeing, I give it about 10 seconds, and if it's not finding anything, hit the refresh button. We have a refresh Wi-Fi button. May very well do the same thing, but it doesn't refresh the whole page. That's probably going to be something like an Ajax control or something going on behind that button. But I'm not seeing anything happen from that, so we're just going to refresh again. And if it doesn't come up in just a few seconds, it's, in my experience, it's not going to. So we'll just stay with it. And I would say at this point, if you haven't been able to connect to it after 5 or 6 attempts, the best thing to do is power it down and let it come back up. And why that's the case, I could not tell you. I've been a software engineer for more than 20 years, and that makes no sense to me, but you kind of run into that. There we have our SSID. So I think that was 5 or 6 refreshes that we did on the page itself. And here's workshop, what we want to connect to. And I'll put my password in. And we'll connect and reboot. Have no IP address. That doesn't mean, in my experience, that we're not actually connected. We may have to do our refresh a few times to get it to come up. One might wonder, why doesn't it have an IP address displayed as soon as it comes up? Well, you get back into that same old thing. The router that's deciding what IP address is going to use is some 30 feet away, and the controller goes through several processes before it even gets to that. It receives the IP address from the router that's in the garage, as I mentioned before. And by the time all that happens, this page is already posted. So, needless to say, some things happen. And still no IP address. I believe it has one, but it's just not displaying just yet. That part I still don't fully understand. We may be in for another reboot. Yep, there's the workshop. Did pull that up. And I believe we're already connected. Let's see. Yep, the option to cancel or disconnect and reboot is there, so we're going to cancel. And since we know we're connected, let's go back to the control page. Cancel, and keep refreshing until we get that IP address displayed. And once again, the reason we want that IP address is so we can go to a different computer, put that IP address in the browser, and be able to control this machine from a different computer. Preferably one in the house where it's cool. All right.
Well, I'm going to power it down.
All right, and there we'll have our IP address. So we didn't change anything at all on our network configuration, just simply rebooted the machine. We're now on the network that we want. That's the SSID from the router in the garage, and the IP address is 192.168.1.143. And that last octet was the number we were waiting on. So what we'll do is have a look at our computer over here, and My eyesight isn't what it used to be, but maybe we can get that 143 in here. 143, 192.168.1.143. And let's see if it finds it. Not secure, that's okay because it's on our LAN. And it looks like we're still waiting on that to load, so I'm going to say there's probably some network related obstacle that we got to get sorted out. That contradicts the information that I learned earlier in the day, but that may be outdated. So we're going to take a look, see if we can't get that sorted out, and be back when we get it straightened out. Well, here we are about 24 hours later, and the issue has been resolved. And it was pretty simple, actually, when it comes right down to it. The controller, the Raspberry Pi radio inside this controller box here is simply too far from the router in the garage to be able to connect to it reliably. And so what I did to solve that problem is I re-added, I originally had this little, I think it's a Vanon brand wireless extender. Bought it on Amazon some time ago, 25, 30 bucks, something like that. And plugged it in and configured it to connect to the router that's in the garage, as I mentioned before. And just bam, it just comes right up. Now if you go to the network section, it just instantly finds the SSID that we need it to find, and it's because it's so close to the to this wireless extender. The speeds are great, and I was also able to come over here on my other computer and pull up the control page for the Onefinity. So that was ultimately that was the objective I was trying to reach, and it was a little bit complicated here at my place, but basically I have AT&T internet. It comes into the router they provided. I have a wireless access point, and that's the one in the garage that I mentioned before. This is the repeater that communicates wirelessly with the access point in the garage. That's the one right over there I mentioned. And the computer that is attached to the machine behind me I just showed you is here, and the controller for the Onefinity also communicates wirelessly with that wireless extender. So all things considered, it wasn't all that difficult to get set up, but the distance from the wireless access point or router or wherever you're getting your radio signal from is a complete deal breaker if it's too far away. You might see occasionally instances of it popping up here, but if you don't see it reliably in that window there, then I would definitely consider changing some things about your setup. And when it comes right down to it, just running a cable is kind of a hard approach to beat. Wasn't really an option in my case because of the concrete outside that I'm just not going to cut up to run a cable. So anyway, I hope this video helped everybody out, and please like and subscribe if it did, and stay tuned for more CNC videos.